The wind howled across the barren plains like a restless spirit, carrying with it the sharp sting of winter's frost. The sun had long vanished behind the jagged cliffs of the Rockies, leaving the world in a muted silver twilight. In the middle of this frozen wasteland, the snow lay thick, untouched, except for a small depression where the icy ground seemed to swallow everything whole. Amid the blinding whiteness, a pale face peeked out, the rest of the young woman's body hidden beneath the snow. Her auburn hair, streaked with frost, clung to her cheeks, and her eyes, wide with fear and exhaustion, searched the horizon as if calling for help that might never come. Her lips, cracked from the cold, whispered prayers that dissolved into the wind. Her name was Isolde Harper, 30 years old, with a heart that had once known joy but now trembled with betrayal. Only hours before, she had been running through the woods, desperate, a small pistol tucked in her coat, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't know which was worse, the snow's merciless bite or the knowledge that the hands that buried her had belonged to the one person she had trusted most, her own brother. Nathaniel Harper. Nathaniel had always been a man driven by shadows, by fears he refused to name aloud. No one in their small mining town of Red Willow had ever understood him. But Isolde had loved him anyway, the way one loves a storm, dangerous, uncontrollable, yet familiar. Until that night. Until the betrayal that froze more than just her body. Far across the ridge, the faint sound of hoofbeats broke the eerie silence. They were heavy, deliberate, almost echoing in the emptiness. The rider approached with a purposeful stride, a lone figure against the pale horizon. Taye Swiftfoot, an Apache warrior of legendary skill and quiet strength, rode his black stallion with the confidence of a man who had survived countless winters and countless battles. His long black hair whipped around his shoulders in the wind, adorned with small silver beads and feathers, each telling a story of survival and honor. Taye had been tracking a band of outlaws who had raided a nearby settlement, but the sudden shimmer of movement in the snow caught his trained eyes. Pulling his horse to a halt, he dismounted, boots crunching on the icy crust, and approached cautiously. There, in the heart of the snowdrift, he saw her. His hands went immediately to the rope of his lariat, but he stopped short. This was no outlaw, no trap. The young woman's face was pale, lips tinged blue, and her eyes, filled with shock and desperation, stared into his with a silent plea. Taye's heart tightened. He knelt beside her and began digging with swift, practiced motions, snow scattering around him like white rain. "Hold on," he murmured, voice low and steady, a grounding presence in the frozen void. "You'll be safe soon." Hours or perhaps minutes, for time seemed distorted in the biting cold past before Isolde was fully freed. Her body shivered violently, and Taye wrapped her in his thick buffalo blanket, his strong arms supporting her as she collapsed against him, exhausted and trembling. "What happened?" he asked gently, scanning her for injuries. But the question was answered before she could speak. Taye saw the glint of a ring on her finger, a family crest he recognized from the settlement, a mark of the Harper lineage. And in that instant, the pieces fell into place. She had been buried deliberately, the snow acting as a coffin crafted with calculated malice. His eyes narrowed with instinctive caution. Whoever had done this was close and dangerous. Isolde's voice was barely audible, carried on the wind. My brother, he left me here for the snow to take me." The words were shards of ice piercing the air, and Taye felt an unfamiliar chill not from the cold, but from the weight of betrayal and the darkness that could dwell in a human heart. Taye tightened his grip on her shoulders. "You're alive," he said firmly, determination hardening in his chest. "And I will make sure no harm comes to you again." Somewhere behind the cliffs, the wind continued to howl, but for the first time since she had been buried, Isolde felt warmth, fragile, uncertain, yet alive. The snow around them had been a grave, but Taye's presence was a promise that the story was far from over, and deep within the shadows of the snowy wilderness, Nathaniel Harper's betrayal lingered like a silent predator, waiting for the moment when the consequences of his actions would finally catch up with him. Taye Swiftfoot tightened the buffalo blanket around Isolde Harper as he lifted her carefully onto his horse. The wind had grown sharper, cutting through their clothes like knives, and the snow underfoot was treacherous, hiding holes and icy patches that could throw even the surest-footed horse. Yet Taye moved with unwavering confidence, each step deliberate, a practiced rhythm honed from years of survival in unforgiving wilderness. Isolde clung weakly to him, shivering violently, and he could feel her teeth chattering against the fabric of the blanket. Her eyes, wide and frightened, darted toward the horizon, toward the cliffs where shadows lay thick, and somewhere out there, she knew, Nathaniel Harper lurked. Her brother's betrayal weighed on her chest like a heavy stone. She had trusted him with her life, and he had buried her in the snow, leaving her to die as punishment for reasons she could not yet understand. "Don't speak," Taye said gently, sensing her thoughts. "Save your strength. We'll get somewhere safe first." The black stallion moved steadily, leaving a trail of hoof prints in the fresh snow. The cold gnawed at them, but Taye's presence was a shield, silent, reassuring, a reminder that she was no longer alone. The night stretched long, and the world around them seemed frozen in time. Every tree, rock, and ridge etched in stark monochrome. Isolde finally murmured, her voice raw, "Why? Why would he? My own brother?" Taye shook his head, keeping his gaze forward. "Some people carry shadows too heavy for love to survive. We'll figure that out later. Right now, survival comes first." Hours passed, the wind never ceasing, but Taye found them shelter in a hollowed-out cave halfway up the ridge. He built a small fire using dry twigs and pine needles he had carried in his satchel. The flickering flames threw long, dancing shadows across the walls, casting the cave in an almost otherworldly glow. He helped Isolde sit close to the warmth, wrapping her more securely in the buffalo blanket, and offered her some dried meat and water. She hesitated, then took it, hunger gnawing at her more than the cold. I can't believe he," she whispered again, shaking her head. He never said why." Taye's expression softened, but there was steel beneath his warmth. "Betrayal is a hard thing to understand, especially from someone you trust. But you survived, Isolde. That means something." Her hands trembled as she held the water, and he noticed the faint scars along her wrists, hidden beneath the blanket's silent testimony to Nathaniel's cruelty. His jaw tightened. Whoever her brother was, he would answer for this. But Taye knew they had to wait for the right moment. Confrontation now could be deadly, with the snowstorm rising outside and the Harper settlement miles away. Night deepened, and the fire flickered low. Taye kept watch, sitting at the cave entrance, muscles tense even in repose, alert for any movement. Every snap of a branch, every distant howl, made him draw his hand to the knife at his belt. He had faced outlaws, predators, and storms that could kill a man in an hour, but tonight he guarded not just life, but trust, fragile and precious. Isolde finally closed her eyes, exhausted beyond reason. Her body had been pushed to the edge of death, and now, for the first time, she felt a faint pulse of hope. Taye's presence was steady, grounding a living promise that she could survive. Her brother's treachery and the merciless winter. The night passed slowly. Snow fell in endless sheets, thickening the world outside into a silent tomb. Taye's mind, however, never rested. He considered their next move. The Harper settlement was nearby, but it was filled with danger. Nathaniel's influence extended further than she realized. And yet, there was no turning back. Isolde could not face another night buried in the snow, not with her life hanging by a thread by the time dawn crept across the horizon. Painting the snow in faint pink and gold, Isolde had regained some of her strength. Taye helped her to her feet, steadying her. "We'll move at first light," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Keep close, trust your steps, and don't look back." For the first time since that night in the snow, Isolde nodded. The terror that had frozen her heart began to thaw, replaced by a fragile spark of courage. Beside her, Taye's eyes scanned the horizon, black hair whipping in the wind, muscles coiled for the journey ahead. He would see her through this, and when the time came, her brother would not escape the consequences of burying her in the cold. Cruel snow dot, and so, with the pale morning light glinting off icy ridges, they set out together, the snow crunching beneath their feet, and the shadow of betrayal lingering just beyond the horizon. The early morning sun shimmered weakly against the snow, casting long, pale shadows across the frozen plains. Taye Swiftfoot led the black stallion carefully through the white wasteland, Isolde Harper wrapped tightly in the buffalo blanket across his back. Her body was still weak, every step sending shivers through her, but her eyes were sharper now, watching the horizon with a cautious wariness. The snowstorm had lessened, but the wind still carried a biting chill that promised no mercy. "Can you walk a little?" Taye asked, glancing over his shoulder. His muscular frame, bare chest glistening with frost, radiated warmth despite the cold. The tribal jewelry around his neck and arms clinked softly as he moved, a subtle reminder of his Apache heritage and the strength he carried with it. Isolde tried to sit upright, her fingers trembling as she held the blanket around her shoulders. I can try," she whispered, voice hoarse from the cold and the terror of the night before. "But the snow, it's endless." Taye nodded, guiding her toward a small ridge where the snow was shallower. Step by careful step, they moved through the frozen wilderness, the silence broken only by the crunch of snow beneath their boots and hooves. Yet in that quiet, Isolde felt an underlying tension, a sense that danger was never far behind. Finally, they paused atop a small rise overlooking a frozen creek. Taye scanned the area, sharp eyes catching every movement, every shadow. "We're not far from the settlement," he said, "but it's not safe yet. Someone knows you're alive." Isolde swallowed hard. The thought of her brother, Nathaniel Harper, haunted her. He had buried her in the snow with a purpose she still could not comprehend. Fear, anger, and grief twisted together inside her chest, making it hard to breathe. "Why? Why would he do it?" she asked softly, voice trembling. "We were family. He loved me once." Taye shook his head slowly, his gaze intense. "Some people are driven by greed, fear, or shame. Sometimes the ones closest to us can become the most dangerous. We'll uncover his reasons, but right now, you need strength. You need to survive." They continued down the ridge, carefully picking their path along the edges of the frozen creek. Isolde's legs were weak, but Taye's steady guidance kept her moving. Along the way, he told her stories of his people, the Apache warriors who had survived winters harsher than this, battles that seemed impossible, and spirits that guided them through darkness. Each story was a balm, a reminder that courage and survival were born from struggle. Hours passed, and they reached a small grove of pine trees, the dense branches providing some shelter from the wind. Taye gathered some dry wood and started a fire, the flames crackling and sending warmth into the frozen air. Isolde sat close, letting her body absorb the heat, feeling her limbs slowly thaw. "You're safe for now," Taye said softly, his eyes scanning the tree line for signs of movement. "But I need to know. Tell me everything. What led him to do this?" Isolde hesitated, the memories of that night returning like shards of ice. Nathaniel had argued with her about her inheritance, the Harper land, and a secret he believed she had kept. Words had escalated. Fear had taken root, and before she realized it, he had forced her outside in the snowstorm, leaving her buried under the cold blanket of winter. Her heart still ached with the betrayal. I don't know all of it, she admitted finally. He said it was for my own good. But that's impossible. Why bury me alive? Taye placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. His touch was firm and steady, a silent promise. We'll find out. And when we do, justice will follow. But you must trust me, Isolde. You're not alone in this anymore. Night fell again, and the fire flickered low. Taye kept watch, muscles tensed, ready to face whatever dangers the wilderness might throw at them. Isolde finally closed her eyes, exhaustion overtaking her. And for the first time in many hours, she allowed herself a fragile sense of hope out above them. The sky was clear, stars glittering like shards of ice. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Nathaniel Harper's treachery still lingered, a shadow that could strike at any moment. But with Taye by her side, Isolde felt a spark of courage growing within her, a determination to survive, to uncover the truth, and to confront the brother who had tried to bury her in the snow. The frozen world around them was silent, yet alive with hidden threats. And as Taye tightened the blanket around Isolde, preparing for another night in the wilderness, both knew that the journey ahead would test them in ways neither had imagined. The wind had shifted, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke from distant chimneys of the Harper settlement. Taye Swiftfoot's sharp eyes caught the glimmer of sunlight reflecting off a small cluster of wooden buildings partially hidden behind snow-laden trees. They were close, yet danger still hung in the air. Invisible but tangible. Isolde Harper shivered despite the buffalo blanket wrapped tightly around her. Her auburn hair, now slightly thawed from the warmth of the fire, clung to her face in damp strands. Her body had regained some strength, but the memory of being buried alive gnawed at her, each thought of Nathaniel Harper twisting her gut with betrayal. "We're really close?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Taye nodded, his muscular chest rising and falling with steady breaths. "Yes, but stay alert. He will expect you to come back, and he will not wait for long. If he realizes you survived, he will strike without hesitation." The journey toward the settlement was slow. Every step across the icy ground required care, and Taye's black stallion moved like a shadow, silent and deliberate. Isolde kept close, gripping the blanket, her mind replaying the moment she had been buried, the cold snow pressing against her chest like a weight too heavy to bear. She could still feel the terror, the suffocating sensation of being trapped. And above it all, the face of her brother, calm and unrepentant, haunted her thoughts. When they finally reached the edge of the settlement, the snow had begun to melt in small patches, revealing the frozen earth beneath. Smoke rose from chimneys, curling toward the gray sky, and the faint sounds of life, children playing, animals stirring carried across the quiet streets. Taye guided Isolde to a small abandoned barn on the outskirts, hidden from sight. Here, they could rest, plan, and gather the courage needed to face what lay ahead. Inside, Isolde sank to the floor, wrapping the blanket tighter around her. Taye knelt beside her, examining the path ahead in his mind. "Your brother's influence stretches far," he said softly. "But he underestimated one thing: you are not alone. And neither I." Isolde swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I trusted him. Taye, I thought he would protect me." Her voice broke, the raw emotion spilling out. "How could he bury me in the snow?" Taye's gaze hardened, his eyes dark with intensity. Some men are blinded by fear or greed, or by the need to control. Nathaniel's actions are unforgivable, but we will uncover the reason. And when we do, justice will follow. But for now, your life matters most." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and the soft creaking of the barn. Outside, the settlement's quiet rhythm continued, unaware of the storm of secrets lurking in the shadows. Night fell, the sky a deep indigo, and the barn became a sanctuary of sorts. Taye built a small fire, the flames flickering across his chiseled muscular chest, adorned with tribal jewelry that caught the light. Isolde sat close, feeling the warmth seep into her frozen limbs, a fragile comfort amidst the lingering fear. "I can't stop thinking about what he said," she admitted finally, voice trembling. "That I had to disappear. That it was for my own good. But how can leaving me to die in the snow ever be good?" Taye's hand rested on her shoulder, firm and grounding. "It was never good. It was selfishness, and it was fear. Fear makes people do terrible things, especially those they claim to love. But your survival proves his fear was wrong. You are stronger than he thought." A shadow moved outside, catching Taye's sharp eye. He rose instantly, muscles taut, knife at his belt. Isolde flinched, heart pounding. "It's okay," he whispered. "I see movement, but it's just the wind." Yet even as they sat by the fire, the weight of betrayal lingered. Nathaniel Harper had not just tried to kill his sister. He had fractured the very bond of family, replacing trust with fear. Taye's mind raced, considering every possible outcome, every path they might take. He could feel the tension thickening, the threads of the past and present intertwining, leading inevitably to a confrontation that neither of them could avoid. By the time Isolde finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Taye remained vigilant, his eyes scanning the barn's entrance. He knew the Harper settlement was no ordinary place, and Nathaniel's cunning could not be underestimated. But for the first time since the snow had nearly claimed her life, Isolde felt a measure of hope. And that hope, fragile though it was, would carry them forward into the storm of shadows that awaited them both. Dawn crept slowly across the snow-covered settlement, turning the icy rooftops into a canvas of pale gold and silver. Taye Swiftfoot guided Isolde Harper through the narrow paths between the buildings, keeping her low and hidden. The Harper settlement appeared tranquil, but Taye knew better. Peace in the Old West was often an illusion, a thin veil over secrets, betrayal, and danger. Isolde's legs wobbled as she walked, but her gaze was sharp, scanning every shadow. "Taye, what if he finds us before we understand why?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Taye's dark eyes, framed by long black hair and adorned with beads and feathers, remained fixed ahead. His muscular chest rose and fell steadily, the tribal jewelry around his neck catching the early light. "Then we survive," he said firmly. "We've made it this far. You trust me, and I trust you to stay strong." They reached the edge of the settlement near a frozen creek, where the Harper family homestead rose slightly apart from the others. The large wooden structure, partially buried in snow, seemed almost foreboding. Taye motioned for Isolde to crouch behind a snowdrift. "There," he said softly, pointing to a small window on the side of the house. "Through there, we may find answers without being seen." Isolde's heart pounded in her chest. She had not stepped foot inside the Harper home since that terrible night. The memory of her brother Nathaniel, smirking as he forced her into the snowstorm, made her stomach twist. Yet curiosity and the need for answers overpowered her fear. Taye carefully helped her through the window, his strong arms steadying her as she climbed inside. The interior was dimly lit by the morning sun filtering through frosted glass. Dust and frost coated the wooden floors, and a faint smell of smoke lingered, evidence of a long burning fire. They moved silently through the house, Taye keeping a hand on Isolde's shoulder. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corners of the room made her pulse quicken. Finally, They reached a small study where papers and ledgers were scattered across a desk. It was here that the truth began to emerge. Taye's eyes scanned the documents, sharp and analytical. These are deeds. Agreements. Some dated years back, he muttered. It seems your brother has been manipulating the family lands for a long time. Isolde's fingers trembled as she picked up a letter, her breath catching. The handwriting was unmistakable Nathaniel's. The words spoke of fear, control, and a twisted sense of protection. He had believed that Isolde's inheritance, the Harper estate, was too dangerous for her to manage. In his mind, burying her in the snow was a cruel but necessary step to ensure she would not make decisions he feared. Tears welled in Isolde's eyes as she whispered, He thought I wasn't strong enough, that I would ruin everything. Taye placed a steady hand over hers. Strength isn't measured by what he believes. You survived the snow, Isolde. You endured betrayal and lived. That is strength no one can take away. The sound of footsteps outside made both of them freeze. Taye's muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike, his dark eyes scanning for threats. The door creaked open, and Nathaniel Harper appeared in the doorway, his face twisted with a mix of anger and fear. Isolde, you shouldn't have come here. Isolde stepped back, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself, but Taye positioned himself between them, chest bare, muscles tense, and tribal jewelry glinting in the sunlight. Step aside, Nathaniel, he said, voice low and commanding. You left her for dead once. Don't try it again. Nathaniel's hand shook. Whether from cold or fury, Isolde could not tell. Hi, I did it for you, he shouted, desperation breaking through the arrogance he usually wore like armor. You didn't understand. I had to protect you. Taye's dark eyes narrowed. Protection does not mean burying someone alive. That is murder, and you know it. Isolde's heart pounded. For years she had trusted her brother, believed in him, and loved him. And yet, the truth was clear. He had tried to end her life, thinking he knew what was best. But with Taye at her side, she no longer felt helpless. Outside, the snow glistened in the morning sun, untouched and pure, a stark contrast to the darkness that had festered within the Harper homestead. And in that quiet, powerful moment, Isolde realized something. The snow that had almost claimed her life could not bury her spirit. With Taye's strength and guidance, she was ready to face the betrayal and the brother who had tried to end her. The morning sun glinted coldly off the snow outside, turning the Harper homestead into a glaring white frame that made every shadow inside seem darker. Taye Swiftfoot remained between Isolde Harper and her brother, muscles taut, chest bare, the tribal jewelry around his neck and arms catching the light with every subtle movement. The air was thick with tension, every heartbeat echoing louder than the wind outside. Nathaniel Harper's face was pale, lips tight, eyes darting from Isolde to Taye. You don't understand. I did it to protect you. He shouted again, his voice cracking with desperation and fear. But Isolde's eyes, sharp and unwavering, met his with a mixture of pain and accusation. Protect me? By burying me in snow? By leaving me to die? Taye's voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of authority and undeniable strength. You thought this would control her, Nathaniel, but it only made her stronger. She survived what you hoped would end her. His dark eyes, framed by long black hair, bore into Nathaniel's, leaving no room for denial. Isolde shook her head, struggling to contain the torrent of emotion that surged within her. I trusted you. I loved you as my brother. And you, her voice broke, you tried to kill me. Nathaniel's hands trembled. He looked as though the weight of the snow, the cold, and his own guilt were pressing down on him. I couldn't let you make mistakes. You don't know how dangerous the Harper lands are. How much blood has been spilled over what belongs to our family? Isolde's fingers tightened around the buffalo blanket, frost still clinging to her hair. And you thought burying me alive was the only way to protect me? That is not love, Nathaniel. That is fear. Taye stepped closer, placing a firm hand on Isolde's shoulder. His presence was magnetic, unyielding, a protective wall of strength. She survived, Nathaniel. And now you face her. Not as a child, not as a sister under your control, but as a woman who endured the snow, the cold, and your betrayal. Nathaniel's eyes dropped to the floor, the anger in them melting into something colder, heavier. The secret that had driven him to bury his sister, the fear of losing control, the greed for the family lands, and his own twisted sense of protection was laid bare by Taye's unwavering gaze. He could not deny what had been done. Isolde, despite the cold still creeping into her bones, felt a strange clarity. The snow that had buried her, the cold that had nearly taken her life, and the betrayal that had shaken her trust, all of it had forged a new strength. She was no longer a victim. She was alive, and she had Taye Swiftfoot, a warrior whose protection and courage had carried her through the storm. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint crackle of the fireplace. Nathaniel looked up, his expression a mixture of shame, fear, and something like regret. I thought I was doing the right thing, he whispered, voice barely audible over the wind outside. Taye's gaze did not waver. Right or wrong does not excuse burying someone in snow to control them. You are responsible for your actions, Nathaniel. Isolde stepped forward, her face still pale from the frost, her auburn hair damp but no longer frozen. I forgive you, in the sense that I understand fear can twist a man's mind. But I cannot forget, and I will never allow you to harm me or anyone else again. Nathaniel sank to his knees, his head bowed, the realization of his actions pressing down on him like the weight of the snow he had used as a weapon. Outside, the snow glistened under the sun, bright and pure, a stark contrast to the shadows that had lingered inside the Harper home. Taye moved beside Isolde, his bare chest glistening with light sweat from the tension, his tribal jewelry jingling faintly. The snow cannot bury the truth, he said softly. It only reveals it. And now the truth stands before you, Nathaniel. As the cold wind whipped around the homestead, Isolde felt a strength she had never known. The snow that had almost claimed her life had not defeated her. Instead, it had unveiled the truth, exposed the betrayal, and brought Taye Swiftfoot into her life, a warrior, a protector, and a witness to her survival. For the first time since that fateful night, she felt the warmth of hope blossoming within her chest, and the certainty that she would no longer be defined by fear, snow, or betrayal. The snow had buried her body, yes, but it could never bury her spirit. The Harper homestead was quiet now, the tense confrontation behind them. Nathaniel Harper remained on his knees, the weight of his betrayal pressing on him like the snow that had nearly killed his sister. Outside, the winter sun reflected off the snow, turning the world into a blinding white expanse that seemed almost untouched by the shadows of human cruelty. Isolde Harper wrapped the buffalo blanket tighter around herself, her auburn hair now thawed and glinting in the soft light. She looked at her brother, seeing not just the man who had betrayed her, but the fear and regret that had driven him to do it. And beside her, Taye Swiftfoot stood like a sentinel, muscular, bare-chested, adorned with tribal jewelry, his long black hair sweeping in the breeze, eyes sharp and unwavering. He had been her strength through the storm, her protector in the wilderness, and now her guide through the emotional frost her brother had left behind. Taye's deep voice broke the silence. Nathaniel Harper, you made your choice. You buried her in snow, believing you were protecting her. But now you face the consequence. trust broken, fear sown, and a survivor who will no longer bow to threats. Nathaniel lowered his gaze, trembling. I see now. I was blinded. By fear, by greed, by thinking I knew what was best for her. His voice trailed off, swallowed by shame. Isolde's eyes softened slightly, though she remained wary. You don't get to undo what you did. But I understand now. Fear can twist even those we love. I survived the snow. I survived your betrayal. And I will survive whatever comes next. Taye stepped closer, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. The warmth radiating from his bare chest and the glint of his tribal jewelry reassured her. The snow could not bury your spirit, Isolde. You are alive. You are strong. And with that strength, no one, not even your own brother, can take that from you. Isolde nodded, a new determination filling her. The snowstorm that had nearly claimed her life now seemed like a distant memory, a test that had forged her resilience. She looked at Taye, gratitude and a quiet admiration shining in her eyes. You saved me, she said softly. Not just from the snow, but from despair. From feeling powerless. Taye's gaze was steady, unwavering. You saved yourself, Isolde. I only guided you. Your courage brought you this far. Nathaniel remained kneeling, the reality of his actions etched into his face. The snow he had intended as a tomb had instead revealed the truth, and it had exposed the consequences of his cruelty. He looked up at Isolde, eyes filled with a mixture of shame and sorrow. I don't know how to make this right, he admitted. Isolde's voice was calm, resolute. You can start by never trying to control me or anyone else through fear again. That is all you owe. Beyond that, we must rebuild, slowly, carefully, and with honesty. Outside, the wind rustled the snow-covered trees, carrying away the last remnants of the storm that had threatened her life. The winter landscape, once a grave, now glimmered with possibility. Isolde felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by a cautious hope. Taye helped her to the window, where the snow sparkled in the morning light. See that? He said softly. The snow buried you once, yes, but it also preserved the truth. And truth is what sets us free. Isolde took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs with a sense of renewal. She glanced at Taye, strength and reassurance in his eyes, and then at her brother, kneeling and humbled. The snow had taken nothing from her spirit. It had only made her stronger, more aware of who she was and what she would no longer tolerate. Finally, she stepped outside, the crunch of snow beneath her boots echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. Taye followed, protective but respectful of her newfound independence. Nathaniel watched silently, knowing the past could not be undone, but perhaps in time, trust could be rebuilt or at least replaced with understanding. The sun rose higher, scattering the shadows across the snow-covered homestead. Isolde Harper, once buried in snow with only her face above the ice, now stood tall, alive, and resolute. With Taye by her side and the weight of betrayal lifted from her heart, she faced the winter wilderness not with fear, but with courage and the knowledge that even the harshest storm could not break her spirit. The snow had buried her body, yes, but it could never bury her soul.